Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting: if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. Coming together. Blurb. 16-year-old Maya is just an ordinary teen in an ordinary town. Sure, she doesn't know much about her background. The only thing she really has to cling to is an odd paw print birthmark on her hip, but she never really put much thought into who her parents were or how she ended up with her adopted parents in this tiny medical research community on Vancouver Island. Until now. Strange things have been happening in this claustrophobic town, from the mountain lions that have been approaching Maya to her best friend's hidden talent for feeling out people and situations, to the new bad boy who makes Maya feel different. Combine that with a few unexplained deaths and a mystery involving Maya's biological parents, and it's easy to suspect that this town might have more than its share of skeletons in its closet. Prologue. Serena stood on the rock ledge 20 feet above the lake, singing in a voice known to bring tears to the eyes of everyone who heard it. Everyone except me. For God's sake, Sari, I said, just dive already. Serena stuck out her tongue and shifted closer to the edge, toes wrapping around it. She bounced there, blonde ponytail bobbing, cheeks puffing. Then she dove. It was, as usual, an effort worthy of the Olympics, and she sliced into the water so smoothly that barely a ripple pinged across the glassy surface. She popped back up, sleek as a seal. Your turn, Maya. I flipped her the finger. She laughed and dove again. Serena was the swimmer captain of the school team. It's not my thing, really. This was the part I liked, just sitting on the rock ledge, bare feet dangling. I basked in the morning sun, drinking in the rich, late summer air and the perfect view of the crystal clear lake, the distant snow-capped mountains, the endless evergreens. As Serena swam to the middle of the lake, I squinted over at the path, looking for a familiar blonde head. Daniel was supposed to join us. Daniel and I had been friends since I'd moved to Salmon Creek when I was 5. Then, last year, there'd been a school dance where the girls were supposed to invite the guys, and Serena thought we should draw straws to see who asked Daniel. I liked him, but not the way Serena did, so I'd fixed the game so she'd win. They'd been together ever since. As Serena swam back toward me, I stripped to my bra and panties, dropping my clothes into the bushes below. Ooh la la, she called. Check out the new undies. Did some amazing friend finally take pity and buy you grown-up stuff? Yes, and she'd better be right about them not going see-through when they get wet. Otherwise her boyfriend is going to see a lot more of me than she'd like. Serena laughed. They'll be fine. White's your color. Shows off your tan. I shook my head at her and plaited my long black hair. I don't have a tan. I'm native. Navajo, maybe. I'd been adopted as a baby and my mother hadn't been around to fill in any background forms. I climbed farther up the rocks and stopped at one overhanging the lake. As I balanced there, Serena called, "Hey, those lowriders show off your birthmark. Did you ask your parents about getting that tattoo?" My fingers dropped to the mark on my hip. It looked like a faded paw print, and I wanted to get it tattooed so it would show up better. Mom says maybe when I'm 16. Dad says when I'm 60. He'll come around. She flipped onto her back and floated. He always does. You should do it for your 16th birthday next year. We'll get your mom to take us over to Vancouver, make a weekend of it. I'll get one, too. I want a nightingale, right over my boob, so when I get up on stage in my dress, cut down to. She flailed suddenly. Maya. She went under. disappeared completely, like a hook had dragged her down. I jumped into the water, and I hit it wrong. Pain smacked me so hard I gasped. Water filled my mouth and my nose. I swam out in a frantic dog paddle. I could see the rings where Serena had gone under. They seemed to get farther away with every clumsy stroke I took. I treaded water, looking around. Serena. No answer. If this is a prank to get me in the lake, it worked, I said, my voice quavering. When she didn't reply, I dove. As I went under, panic hit, like it always did, my gut telling me this was wrong, dangerous, get above the surface or I'd drown. The normally clear lake was brown, churned up dirt swirling through it, and I couldn't see. I shot up from the water. Help! I shouted. Someone! Please! I dove again, blind and flailing, praying my hand or foot would brush Serena. She's been under too long. No, she hadn't. Serena could hold her breath forever. Last year, we'd timed her at a swim meet and she'd stayed under for 5 minutes before the coach ran over and made her stop. I couldn't hold my breath even for a minute. I bobbed up again, gasping. Maya! I followed the shout to the shore. The sun glinted off the wet rocks and I blinked. Then I glimpsed blonde wavy hair and a flash of tan skin as Daniel yanked off his shirt. It's Serena, I shouted. She went UND. My kicking leg caught on something. I tried to pull, but it tightened around my ankle. I went under, screaming. Water filled my mouth as it closed over my head. I fought, kicking and twisting, trying to grab at whatever had me. My fingers brushed something soft, and my brain screamed Serena. I tried to grab her, but I was dragged deeper and deeper until my feet hit the bottom. Then, whatever was wrapped around my ankle fell away. I pushed up through the murky water. But as soon as my feet left the lake bottom, I couldn't tell where the surface was anymore. Everything was dark. My lungs burned. My head throbbed. I kept fighting my way up. Oh God, let it be up. Finally I broke through. I felt the sunlight and the slap of cool air, only to go back down again. I pushed up, but couldn't stay afloat, couldn't seem to remember how to tread water. My whole body ached. Staying above was such a struggle, it was almost a relief when the water closed over my head again, peaceful silence enveloping me. I had to struggle not to give in, had to force my arms and legs to keep churning, get my head back above. Arms grabbed me. They seemed to be pulling me under and I struggled against them. Maya! Daniel shouted. It's me. I didn't care. I needed him to let go of me, leave me be, let me breathe. He gripped me tighter, wrapping one strong arm around me as he swam. I told Daniel to let me go, that I could make it to shore, just find Serena, please find Serena. He thought I was still panicking and kept hauling me along until, finally, he heaved me onto the rocks. Serena, I gasped. Get Serena. He hoisted himself up and scanned the shore and I realized he hadn't understood. Oh God, he hadn't heard me. Serena! I yelled. She went under. I was trying to find her. His eyes widened. He twisted and plunged into the lake. I huddled there on a rock, coughing, as he swam out. I watched him dive and come back up. Dive and come back up. Dive and come back up. They dragged the lake that afternoon and found Serena's body. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning. A healthy teenage girl, captain of the swim team, had drowned. No one knew how it happened. An undertow. A cramp. A freak panic attack. There were plenty of guesses but no answers. Soon all that was left of Serena was a monument in the schoolyard. The town moved on. I didn't. Something had happened in that lake, something I couldn't explain. But I would. One day, I would. 1. I stood under the tree and glared up at the three-legged bobcat. I'm not getting you down. You're stuck until I get back from school. Maybe that'll teach you a lesson. Fitz twisted to lick his flank. Not even listening to me, are you? Why do I bother? Same question I ask myself every day, said a voice behind me. It's good training for parenthood. Dad walked down the porch steps. He was dressed in khakis and his Smokey the Bear hat. Ooh, big day in town for our park warden, I said. They're even making you wear the uniform. Haley's mom will be happy. She thinks you look hot in it. Dad turned as red as his hair. Mom's laugh floated out from her studio. Maya Delaney. Leave your father alone. It's true. Nicole heard her saying she loves a guy in uniform, and if Dad ever gets tired of you, her front door is open. But you have to wear the hat. Dad made unhealthy choking noises. Mom only laughed again. Thanks for the warning. Now get moving. You know what happens if you're late. Daniel won't wait. You have to catch him. Which would be a bigger threat if the roads were better or his truck was faster? A cold nose brushed my hand. Even Kenji knows you're running late, Mom called. Now move it. I waved toward the window of her studio at the front of the house. When I reached the end of the drive, I turned around. Dad? Can you check on the fledglings because you overslept again? Right. Sorry. I walked backward. Oh, and we're going across to Vancouver this weekend for my 16th birthday tattoo, right? He shook his head and strode toward the shed. Oh, sure, walk away from the conversation, I said. How come I get in trouble when I do that? You aren't getting a tattoo tomorrow, Maya, Mom called. We'll discuss it later. Now move your butt. Dad disappeared into the shed where I keep the wounded and orphaned animals he finds on the park grounds. I fix them up and release them if I can, or pass them on to a wildlife center if I can't. They aren't pets. Fitz is the only exception. He'd been caught by a trapper who'd never seen a bobcat on the island, and called my dad. After Fitz recovered from the amputation, I'd released him twice but he'd come back. He'd made it clear he was staying, if only for free food and protection from predators with all four of their limbs. My only pet is Kenji, a German Shepherd that my parents bought when we moved to Salmon Creek and they decided a 100-pound canine companion was a wise idea for a girl who liked to roam forests filled with bears, cougars, and other critters that might mistake her for a nice light snack. Would things have been different if I'd had Kenji with me at the lake last year? Serena and I always left her behind, because if we goofed around, she thought we were drowning and tried to pull us to safety. Kenji might have saved Serena. I think about that a lot. I think about all of it a lot. 6 months of therapy hadn't convinced me I'm wrong when I say I could have saved Serena. It wasn't the way I wanted to start my day, so I pushed the thoughts aside as we walked. It was a gorgeous fall morning, unusually dry for this part of Vancouver Island. Massive hemlocks and cedars lined the rutted trail that passed for a road. Wind had the sun dancing through swaying branches, and Kenji tore along the path, pouncing on spots of sunlight like a puppy. The sharp breeze helped chase away the last bits of sleep, perking up my brain with the scent of cedar and rich, dew-damp earth. It was a quiet morning, as usual. No commuter traffic out here. We're the only family living in the park. It's privately owned. The whole town is. This St. Cloud Corporation bought the land a few years before I was born, and decided it was the perfect place for a top-secret research facility. They built the town of Salmon Creek for their employees. Less than 200 people live here. They get their paychecks from the St. Cloud family. They live in houses owned by the St. Clouds. Their kids go to a private school owned by the St. Clouds. Weird, I know, but I'm not complaining, because surrounding the town is 1,000 acres of the most beautiful wilderness you've ever seen, and that's where I call home. When I was 5, the St. Clouds lost their park warden and they went headhunting. They found my dad, who was a ranger in Oregon. My mom's Canadian, though, from the Haida Nation. For her, the job meant coming home. For Dad, it meant the opportunity of a lifetime. For me, it meant growing up in the most amazing place on earth. Living out here does have its challenges, though. Including transportation. Dad used to drive me to school every day, but now Daniel picks me up at the park gates in his truck. He doesn't dare drive the rutted park roads any more than necessary, or the rust holding his pickup together is liable to shake loose. Technically, the park is open to the public, but that's only because it was a condition of sale. Let's just say that the St. Cloud Corporation doesn't exactly roll out the welcome mat to tourists. The park provides minimal services. Same goes for the town itself. The St. Clouds weren't able to buy every cottage and campground between the town site and existing communities, so we do get summer people, campers and cottagers needing basic supplies like groceries and gas, who come to Salmon Creek to get them. At this time of year, though, it's a rare park visitor who isn't a local. So when I heard a woman screaming, my first thought was that a female cougar had ventured into the park, hoping to get lucky. Kenji's ears swiveled forward. She didn't look terribly concerned, which for any other dog would suggest it wasn't a cougar. My parents bought me a big dog to protect me from the local big cats, but Kenji had to be the only canine on the island that didn't really mind them. Bears, wolves, badgers, and foxes sent her into guard dog mode. But not cats. So, when I spotted a cougar stretched out on a thick pine tree branch near the park gates, I wasn't surprised. I can't say the same for the woman clinging to the branch above the cat. She was the one screaming. The cougar, a ragged-eared Tom I called Marv, just stared at her, like he couldn't believe anyone would be dumb enough to climb a tree to escape a cat. There's nothing in this forest as gorgeous as a cougar, a sleek, muscular creature nearly twice the size of Kenji with tawny fur, a black-edged face, and light brown eyes with round pupils. They're one of the most elusive animals in the forest, too. But the woman screaming on the branch really wasn't appreciating the moment. Marv pulled back his lips and snarled, flashing fangs as long as my fingers, which made the woman shriek louder. I stepped into the clearing, staying well out of Marv's pouncing range, waved my arms, and shouted. Kenji chimed in, her deep bark echoing through the forest. The woman stopped screaming. Marv looked over at me and chirped. Yeah, I'm talking to you, old guy, I said. Shoo. Scat. Get out of here. He looked at me like I'd offended him. I shouted and waved some more, staying behind Kenji. I'm not afraid of cougars, but I am suitably respectful of their ability to end my existence with one well-placed chomp. As I yelled and Kenji barked, another sound joined it, the rumble of a badly tuned motor. Then, a honk. A welcoming shout out a rolled down window, followed by a curse as Daniel saw why I wasn't waiting outside the gates. The brakes squeaked. The door slammed. Sneakers pounded the hard earth. It was then that Marv decided it was time to go. Daniel has that effect on people, too. He's only about 5'10", but he's been the island wrestling champion twice and it shows. Marv hopped to the ground, mustered his dignity, and slid into the undergrowth. Daniel shook his head as he watched the cat's black-tipped tail disappear. "Haven't I told you not to play with the big kitties, Maya?" It was Marv. "Again? What's that, the third time this month? I think he likes you. What can I say? I'm serious, catnip." The woman lowered herself to the ground. She was maybe in her early 20s. Asian. Dressed in the kind of rugged outdoor gear you can buy at malls in Vancouver and really shouldn't wear any place wilder than that. She stared at us. "The cat. It just left." Yeah, I said. "Most times, they do. That's a male, meaning he doesn't have any cubs to protect. Plus there's plenty of food around. I'd still suggest you return the favor and steer clear of the park today." I walked to the front gate, opened the pamphlet box, took out the one titled Predator Safety, and handed it to her. Then I pulled my cell phone from my backpack. "I've gotta call this in," I said. "My dad's the warden. All cougar encounters." The woman backed away from me. "I don't have time. That cat's been hanging around. It's a problem. You need to report." "I will. Later." She headed for the road and continued toward town. "Walk in the middle," I called after her. "Cats don't like open areas." She jogged off. Daniel hadn't said a word, which was weird. Normally he'd be the first person giving warnings and making sure she was safe. But he just stood there, staring after her, a strange look on his face. "Yep, she's kinda cute," I said. "That'd be a whole different type of cougar, but I say go for it. Now I gotta look." Then he turned to stare after the woman, frowning. "You know her?" I asked. "I don't think so. Just, something's wrong with her." Yeah. She climbed a tree to escape a cat. She's suffering from a serious case of stupid." "No kidding." He gave her one last look, then waved me to the truck. "Just do me a favor, okay? If you see her again, be careful." I didn't ask what he meant. Daniel does that sometimes. He meets people and just decides he doesn't like them. Last winter, when Dr. Davidoff and his team flew in from the States for their annual visit, Daniel decided he really didn't like a new guy Dr. Davidoff brought and wouldn't have anything to do with him. Mom says that's part of growing up in such a small town. You don't trust strangers. But I say it's just Daniel. Everyone has his quirks, and this is Daniel's. Most times, though, he's right. So when he says steer clear, I do. He opened the passenger door for me. "Such a gentleman," I said. "No, it's sticking, and I don't want you wailing on it again." And he stopped and peered off down the road. I followed his gaze. The road was empty. Where'd she? I tossed my bag in, then strode back along the truck. If she went back in the woods, after getting treed by a cat. Daniel caught my arm. "Don't." I looked up at him. He stared down the road, his face rigid, gaze distant, fingers tightening around my arm. Daniel? Ouch. Hey." He noticed what he was doing and let go. "Sorry. Call your dad and tell him. If she went back into the forest, that's her problem. We're late already." 2. I called my dad on the way to school and told him about the hiker and Marv. Like Daniel said, this was the third time I'd seen the old cat in the past month. For me, that was only a little odd. I saw cougars more than anyone else we knew. Maybe they sensed I was interested in them. Always had been. Of all the animals in the forest, they were my favorite. But a cougar that isn't afraid to get up close and personal with a human is worrisome. Treeing that hiker proved Marv wasn't only taking an interest in me. So I told Dad, and he, in turn, had to notify the police chief and the mayor. When I was called to the office after first period, I wasn't surprised to hear that all three of them were there, looking for a full report. The meeting room wasn't far from my class. Nothing is far in our school. It's a single story divided in two wings, classrooms at one end, common rooms at the other, the principal's office and meeting room in the middle. There are 68 kids at Salmon Creek School, and that's every grade from kindergarten to 12. Having fewer than 70 kids means you know everyone by name. It also means every teacher, all 5 of them, knows you by name, and your parents by name, and your pets, too. There are more kids in the upper grades than the lower ones. When the St. Clouds built their facility, they hired staff with young families, and those kids are all teenagers now. I'm in the biggest class, the grade 11/12 split. The St. Clouds give us the best of everything. That's how they lured employees into a community in the middle of nowhere, promise the best education possible for their children. Our classroom desks are all built to accommodate our laptops, which are replaced every 2 years. Our auditorium has theater-style seating. Our cafeteria has a chef and cloth napkins. We have a gym, but no pool or skating rink, only because the St. Clouds put those in the community center a 10-minute walk away. It all sounds very posh. It's not really. When I say Salmon Creek is in the middle of nowhere, I mean it. We're an hour's drive from the nearest city, and half of that is on empty back roads through uninhabited forest. Since we're living so isolated, we don't feel special the way private school kids might. We aren't here because we get amazing grades or our parents are rich, the extras were just normal. By the time we reach the upper grades, we don't even take advantage of the cafeteria chef anymore. We bring our lunches and grab a picnic table outside. I had to pass through the principal's office to get to the conference room. I waved at the secretary, Ms. Morales. Dad was waiting by the door and ushered me inside. Mayor Tilson was at the espresso machine. He's my friend Nicole's dad. If you didn't know which was the police chief and which was the mayor, you'd probably guess wrong. Chief Carling was a tiny blonde, a few inches shorter than me, dressed in slacks and a silk blouse. The mayor was a foot taller and twice as heavy, with a bulldog face. He wore jeans and a plaid shirt that strained around his waist. When I finished telling them everything that happened that morning, Chief Carling said, "Your dad says this isn't the first encounter you've had with this particular cat. The park is his territory. He's shown up more often lately, though. Getting old and bold, I guess. He hasn't made any threatening moves. I think he's just curious." "Which is not," Dad began. "The point, I know," I said. "The problem is that if we relocate him, another cat will move in. A younger and potentially more dangerous one. The best thing to do would be to have Dr. Hajek trank him a couple of times, teach him that humans aren't fun to hang out with." Mayor Tilson smiled at my dad. "The girl knows her cougars, Rick. Do you remember when you caught her throwing sticks for one?" The mayor retold the story, as if everyone in the room hadn't heard it a million times. It'd been just after we moved to the park. Mom had come out back to find me playing fetch with a young cougar, probably Marv. And Maya says, "Don't worry, Mom. He's got blood on his fur, so he just ate. He isn't hungry." Chief Carling laughed, then said I was right. Marv had to be taught that humans and cougars couldn't be friends. And the best way to do that would be to take Maya along. Make sure he gets the connection between her and the tranquilizer dart. With luck, that'll solve the problem. I agree that he doesn't seem to be a danger, but I don't like this sudden interest. Neither do I, Dad said. All right, then. We won't keep you any longer, Maya. Mayor Tilson rose. I hear you have gym next. Wouldn't want to miss that. He paused, voice lowering a notch. I hope we're going to see you on the track team again this spring. You will. That's our girl. We need our champ. He waved at the wall of trophies. Not all mine, obviously. But there were a lot of trophies, considering the size of our school. As in academics, in sports we get the best of everything. Top equipment. Great coaches, plus expert trainers flown in a few times a year. We can't field a team for football or hockey, so the school concentrates on track, swimming, wrestling, and boxing. In kindergarten we're encouraged to join at least one. I dislike the water, and hate hitting anyone, but when it comes to running, jumping, and climbing, I'm in my element. I'd taken last year off the track team, though. I just didn't have the heart for it after Serena died. I left the meeting. As I walked back through the principal's office, I nearly tripped over a guy with his chair pulled over to the door, eavesdropping. Rafael Rafe Martinez. Salmon Creek's newest student. Actually, our only new student in 3 years. Rich parents in surrounding towns tried to get their kids into our school, but they were always turned down. Rafe wasn't a rich kid. He lived with his older sister in a nearby cabin they'd inherited from a distant relative. I guess the board figured it was the right thing to do, letting him attend our school free of charge rather than spend hours on a bus every day. Rafe told everyone he was from Texas. That was bull. I'd dated a summer guy from Texas, and Rafe's drawl was all wrong. His last name suggested he was Latino, and he kind of looked it, but his high cheekbones and amber eyes said native to me. He was a little taller than Daniel, lean, with black hair that hung just past the collar of his leather jacket. Worn blue jeans and low motorcycle boots completed the image, American teen rebel. It was a look we didn't see a lot at our school, and the other girls loved it. Not that Rafe needed the added cachet. Considering we'd had the same guys in our class since kindergarten, Rafe's novelty factor alone would have had the girls tripping over themselves. He was the hottest ticket in town. And he knew it. When I bumped into him, I said a polite, "Hey," and tried to get past. "Hey, yourself." He grinned and, in spite of myself, I felt a little flip in my stomach. Rafe wasn't gorgeous, but he had a crooked smile and eyes that looked at a girl like she was the first one he'd ever seen. When he stood close, I swore I could feel heat radiating off him. And Rafe always stood close. As I backed up, he hooked a thumb toward the conference room. "Barnes in there?" he asked, meaning the principal. I shook my head. "Haven't seen him." Ms. Morales was around, though. "Yeah, I talked to her. She says I need to talk to Barnes. Late once too often this week." That grin sparked again, like being late for school earned him a place in the Bad Boy Hall of Fame. "No worries," I said. "You didn't miss much." He fell into step beside me, so close his knuckles brushed mine. "I hear you had yourself a close encounter of the wild kind." Morales said you've seen more mountain lions than anyone around here. Says they practically hang out on your doorstep hoping for a saucer of milk and a scratch behind the ears. He meant cougar. Mountain lion is an American term. "I live in the park," I said. "I'm going to see a lot of wild animals. Still, mountain lions. Never seen one myself." He slid a sidelong look my way. Think you could fix that? I thought, but just kept walking. Never been in your park either, he said. What do you say I come over tonight? We can take a walk, look for big cats, watch the stars come out. I laughed. Do lines like that ever work? He only smiled. Can't blame a guy for trying. Actually I could. Rafe didn't just flirt, he charmed girls right up to the point where they fell for him, then he changed his mind. I called him a player with attention deficit disorder. That made Daniel laugh. I didn't think it was so funny. Would I think better of the guy if he followed through and scored with every girl he could? No, but he seemed like a cat toying with a mouse, no plans to make a meal of it, just batting it around a while, leaving it wounded and dazed, then sauntering away. He'd taken a run at me shortly after he arrived. When I turned him down, he'd seemed to take the hint and had backed off. Had that only been a temporary reprieve? I hoped not. Maya, a soft voice called. I glanced over to see Nicole Tilson, the mayor's daughter, at her locker. She looked from me to Rafe, concern darkening her blue eyes. I mouthed "Save me," and her pixie face lit up in a grin. She scampered over. Oh, thank God I found you. Did you read that chapter for history? I was halfway through when Haley called and I never got back. Her eyes widened as if she'd just noticed Rafe there. Oh, hey, Rafe. Do you mind if I steal Maya's brain for a minute? I seriously need it. She tugged my arm, pulling me away before he could answer. Okay, so the first part was on World War II, right? I got as far as... She continued babbling for another minute, then glanced over her shoulder. Okay, he's gone. Thank you. Anytime. I know you don't like him, so she glanced up at me. You don't, right? I mean, I guess not, or you wouldn't have asked me to save you, but if you do. No. Haley can have him. Good. So did you bring your lunch today? If you didn't, I was thinking maybe we could all pop over to the blender. My treat. Mom finally paid me for that extra work I did at the clinic. We stopped at her locker so she could get the book she'd come for. I had to help her with that. I'm only 5'5", but Nicole's at least 4 inches shorter, and the guys like to stick her books up where she can't reach them. Nicole was on the swim team and in the choir, so she'd been more Serena's friend than mine. That changed after Serena died. We'd kind of taken on each other as replacement pals. It wasn't a great fit, we didn't really have that much in common, but it filled a gap. 3. I don't mind school. I'd like it a lot better if it wasn't indoors. Being inside just seems to sap my energy. It's gotten worse the last couple of years. I go home and I crash. That worries my parents, but the doctors say it's a combination of hormones and my metabolism. I'm used to being outside and active, and being a teen only makes it worse. They gave me some vitamins, but I still need a nap most days. When school ends, I get outside as fast as I can. Today I was waylaid by Ms. Morales, who wanted a first-hand account of my cougar encounter. When I finally escaped, I spotted Nicole with Daniel on the other side of the playground. He had an 8th grader pinned to the grass, arm twisted behind his back. Bully! I shouted. Daniel glanced over and grinned. Then he let the kid Travis Carling go and got down on all fours so Travis could try the move on him. As Daniel gave instructions, Travis's brother, Corey, made suggestions that had everyone within earshot laughing. Travis and Corey were Chief Carling's sons. Dark-haired, over 6 feet tall, big and burly, Corey was the school's second best wrestler and boxer after Daniel. Also Daniel's best guy buddy. I could only imagine what he was suggesting Travis do to Daniel while he had him pinned. It was drawing a crowd. Corey always did. He was one of those guys who can talk to anyone and talk his way out of trouble, which in Corey's case is a necessary survival skill. If I had to pick the most popular guy at our school, it'd be a toss-up between Daniel and Corey. Daniel's the one everyone wants on his team, the steady, responsible leader. Corey's the guy everyone wants to party with. As I headed toward them, I felt someone watching me. Rafe. When I looked over, he sauntered my way, grinning like I'd been the one caught staring. Nicole said something to Corey, who looked in my direction. Daniel was on his feet now, coming to meet me. He veered toward Rafe, gaze on me, like he didn't see Rafe there. He cut right in front of him, so close that Rafe had to stop short. Daniel pretended not to notice. As Rafe stopped, Samantha Sam Russo walked past and shouldered him aside with a smirk. She switched it to a genuine smile as she said something to Daniel. Sam is our second newest student. Her parents died 3 years ago, and she'd come to live with the Tilsons, who were her second cousins or something like that. If there was any resemblance between Sam and Nicole, though, I couldn't see it. Sam is an inch taller than me, kind of stocky, with dark spiked hair and wide-set blue eyes. She has freckles, too, and the only time I've seen her wear makeup is when Corey teased that her freckles were cute and she tried to cover them up. When she first arrived in Salmon Creek, we'd all tried to make her feel welcome. Serena and I tried harder than anyone, because we thought she was cool, in a smart mouth, big city way. But Sam wielded her outsider status like a shield, so we'd given up. I still liked her. She was different. She was interesting. And we got along fine, although it'd become clear that getting along was the best I could hope for. The only person at our school she really liked was Daniel. It wasn't a crush, though. She didn't even seem interested in him as a guy, only as a potential friend. Daniel was nice to her, but he already had his quota of female friends. The student she liked least these days was Rafe. He'd made one half-hearted move toward her and I have no idea what she'd said or done, but he'd steered clear ever since. Texas boy taking another run at you. Daniel said as Rafe veered away and continued on. It'll pass. Want me to talk to him? I gave him a look. If there's one problem with having the toughest guy at school as my best friend, this is it. Daniel has a protective streak a mile wide. You want us to take care of the guy? Corey said in a gangster voice as he walked over with Nicole. We could do that. Lots of places to hide a body around here. Deep caves, deep ravines, deep lakes. He stopped short, then smacked me between the shoulder blades. So, how's the almost birthday girl? Getting ready for her big party? Sweet 16 and never been. Daniel cut him off with a sputtering laugh. Believe me, Maya's definitely been kissed. Corey gave a devilish grin. Oh, I wasn't going to say kissed. Nicole blushed furiously, and I laughed. Across the playground, Rafe had been waylaid by Haley Morris, another member of our swim team and singing group. Like Serena and Nicole, she was petite and blonde. We used to joke that this was a requirement for joining. Haley was not a friend. She was, however, Rafe's #1 admirer. She was also the first of his not-quite conquests and the only one who hadn't taken the hint when he moved on. She'd planted herself in front of him. He eased back more politely than I would have expected, just shifting until she was out of his personal space. She got right back into it. He moved back. She moved forward. It was an oddly formal little dance, and I was watching it when Daniel said, Maya, Ready to go. Anytime you are. Can I get a lift to the community center? Nicole asked. I want to squeeze in some swim practice before Ms. Martin comes by for my singing lesson. Corey frowned. That's a lot of practice, Nick. Are you sure you'll have time to do your homework? Of course. I do homework right after. She caught his expression and blushed as she realized he was teasing her. At least she does her homework, I said. Daniel turned to Nicole. Sure, I'll give you a lift. You ready, Maya? Doesn't look like Maya needs a ride today, Corey said. I followed his gaze to see my dad barreling down on me, scowling in a way that really didn't suit him at all. Daniel mouthed, "Call me," and headed for his truck, Nicole trailing. In the car, Dad said, pointing to the Jeep at the curb. Now. What did I said now, Maya. He strode off, leaving me tagging along like I was 5, every kid still in the schoolyard watching. Mom was in the passenger seat. She rolled down the window, smiling, then saw my expression. What's wrong? She asked. No idea, I said. He won't tell me. She moved the seat forward for me to squeeze in the back. Rick, what? She laughed, then I saw Dad's grin as he slid into the driver's seat. Pay back for this morning, he said. You embarrass me, I embarrass you. Oh, that's mature, I said. Keeps me young. So, did you bump into Mrs. Morris today? I hear Mr. Morris is away at a conference. I waggled my brows at him in the rearview mirror. Enough, you two, Mom said. What's with the ride? I said. You missed me so much you couldn't wait for me to get home. Don't answer that, Rick. Mom looked back at me as Dad pulled away from the curb. We need to pick up some things in the city, and we thought we'd go out for dinner. By city, she did not mean Vancouver. When I tell online friends that I live on Vancouver Island, they start asking questions about the city of Vancouver. I guess it makes sense that it would be on the island with the same name. It's not. It's across the strait, and while it's barely 35 kilometers away, the water flowing in between means we only cross for special occasions. The city we were heading to was Nanaimo, on the eastern coast. With just under 100,000 people, it was hardly a major urban center, but on an island almost 500 kilometers long, with a population of under 1 million, half of them living in Victoria at the southern tip. You take what you can get. I can pick the restaurant, right? Since Saturday is my birthday and apparently we aren't going to Vancouver to get my tattoo. Not that I'm bitter about that. I stopped as I glimpsed a familiar face out the window. Hey, there's that hiker from this morning. Did you ever catch up with her? No, and I really do need her to file a report. Hold on. Dad pulled over to the curb as a group of kids passed. He peered out the window. Where'd she go? Right there, behind Travis Carling. Dad opened the door and got out. The kids went by, and there was no one else on the sidewalk. I rolled down the window. She was right there. I pointed. In front of the library. The library was part of the community center, which took up most of the block, meaning there was no way the woman had ducked around it. Dad walked over and tried the library doors, but they were locked. It was open only 3 days a week. I think it's time for a drug test, Dad said as he came back to the car. I'm serious. I saw her. Maya's right, Mom said. I noticed her before the kids went by. I don't know where she went, but she was there. She doesn't want to tattle on the cute kitty, I said. Don't worry. Just hand her the papers while she's cornered again by 175 pounds of snarling kitty and she'll change her mind. 4. It took us 5 minutes to get out of Salmon Creek, without exceeding the speed limit. When I tell people that I live in a place with fewer than 200 people, they don't really get what that means. They say things like, "Oh, I'm in a small town, too, and I look up theirs to see it has a population of 6,000. 200 people means Salmon Creek doesn't get on most maps. It's not even a town, it's a hamlet, with only 6 streets, the downtown strip, and 5 courts of about 10 houses each. There are 3 shops downtown. There's a decent grocery, but if my mom needs anything more exotic than white mushrooms and dried herbs, she has to grow it in our greenhouse. There's a hardware store, but if you want something unusual, it has to be ordered from the city. Then there's the Blender, our only restaurant, owned and run by Haley's dad. Good food, but don't expect sushi. Kids in other small towns complain about needing to go to the city to find a mall. We can't even buy clothing here. Well, we can, but it's carried by the hardware store, and unless your fashion sense runs to coveralls and rubber boots, you'd better plan a trip to Nanaimo. The last building we passed on the way out of town was the medical research facility. That might sound like a huge hospital-sized place, with helicopters landing on the roof at all hours, but it's just a boring-looking building, 2 stories tall, about the size of a small office complex. It looks innocent enough, like you could walk right through the front doors. And you could, you just wouldn't get much farther. Security is super tight in there. Every door has a keycard lock and some have access codes, too. I know because I've been in it. Everyone has. One problem with running a top-secret facility is that it makes people curious. So every year there's an open house. Most of us kids stopped going as soon as our parents let us. It's an afternoon of hearing talks on their drug research and being toured around labs full of computers and test tubes. Drug research may be big business, big enough to build a town to protect it, but it's killer dull. I'd be a lot more interested in a negative way if they were doing animal testing. If they are, it isn't here. Same with subject groups, they don't ever visit Salmon Creek. The helipad on the roof is only for flying in other doctors like Dr. Davidoff and his group and corporate bigwigs from the St. Cloud Company, who want to keep tabs on where their money is going. So Salmon Creek is a small, quiet place. Maybe I'd be itching to get out if I remembered living somewhere else. But most kids are fine with Salmon Creek. We get used to driving an hour to the city. Our parents have carpooled monthly trips for us since we were young. Almost all of us plan to go off to college or university, and not many intend to return, but we're happy enough living here until then. When we finally got to Nanaimo, we parked at the harbor front. There's a ferry up the coast that will take you over to Vancouver across the Strait of Georgia. You'd be able to see the city from the harbor if there weren't islands in the way. Well, in theory you could, though at this time of year we usually get fog, and sometimes you can't see even those nearby islands, despite them being close enough to swim to if you're really good. Serena swam out to Protection Island once and I shook off the memory. Canada might be famous for its winters, but that doesn't apply here. Vancouver Island is temperate rainforest. We get rain, not snow. This year, our dry summer was holding on, and the occasional memo about small wildfires in the interior was making Dad nervous. Nobody else was complaining, that was for sure, and it was nice to look out and see all the islands, not a curtain of fog. We walked along the marina docks. It was a gorgeous afternoon, the sun shining off the water, boats lined up at the floating Petrocan station to fill up before heading out to sea. An engine whined as a seaplane took off. We crossed front, then cut along a tiny street before coming out on Commercial. I scanned the street, a mix of local and tourist shops, about half of them devoted to food. "Can we get a snack before we shop?" I asked. "I'm starving." Mom shook her head. "You can grab a chocolate bar, but we need to be someplace before 5. "No, that's okay," Dad said. "Go ahead." When Mom gave him a look, he said, if she'd rather get something to eat, let her. There's always next year. Or the year after that. I stopped walking. "Okay, what's up?" When neither said a word, I peered down the street of shops and saw a sign that caught my eye, Sacred Ink. "Oh my God," I said. "Seriously?" I grinned and grabbed Mom's arm. "Seriously?" "Yes. You're getting your tattoo." I threw my arms around Dad's neck. "Thank you." "Hey," Mom said. I'm the one who had to persuade him it wasn't going to turn his little girl into a streetwalker. "I never said that," Dad said. "No." I said. "Cool. 'Cause I've decided to skip the paw print. I'm thinking of a tramp stamp with flames that says hot in here." "No, wait. Arrows. For directionally challenged guys." Mom grabbed Dad's shoulders and steered him away from me. "She'll get exactly what we agreed on. Now go hang out in a guy store and we'll call when we're done." "This is so cool," I said loudly as Dad walked away. "Have you met the tattoo artist? Is he hot?" "He's a she," Mom said. "Is she hot?" "'Cause I'm still young, you know. My identity isn't fully formed." "Your father can't hear you anymore, Maya." Mom sighed. "Poor guy. Why can't you be a normal teenage daughter who'd sooner die than say the words identity in front of him? You guys raised me right. You should be proud." I picked up my pace, but Mom said, "No need to run. Your appointment isn't for another 20 minutes. I slowed to let her catch up. "So how'd you get Dad to agree? Did you play the cultural card?" "Of course not. That would be wrong." I grinned. "You did, didn't you?" Dad's quick to defer to her on that part of my upbringing. If she'd told him that tattooing was a part of native culture, he would have backed down. Mom's background, though, is as different from mine as English is to Irish. That makes it tough on her. She wants me to be aware of my roots, but she isn't really sure what they are, so she teaches me what she knows instead. My Haida grandmother lives in Skydgate on the Queen Charlotte Islands north of us, and we're really close. She's a lot more into the traditions than my mom is. I love hanging out with her, working at the cultural center, and helping with the festivals. But sometimes I feel like one of the tourists. I felt the same way when I was 12 and we visited a Navajo reservation. And I felt the same way when we went to visit Dad's extended family in Dublin. I'm aware of my background, and I'm proud of it, but I don't really feel attached to it. Maybe that'll change someday. I wasn't surprised when we got close to the tattoo studio and I saw a Haida raven painted on the sign. Inside, I could see more native art, and a shocking lack of skulls, Celtic crosses, and dragons. "Cool," I said. "The owner is a young woman who graduated from Emily Carr," Mom said. "Not exactly the kind of art they had in mind, I'm sure." "Is she Haida?" Mom shook her head. "I believe she's a member of the Scots tribe. In other words, Caucasian. That could earn her some ill will among natives if she used their designs in tattoos, but Mom would say it was no different than a Russian tattooing Celtic knot work. As long as she'd studied the art and understood its meaning, Mom would be fine with it. Grandma would disagree. They'd respect each other's opinions, though, and Mom always said that was the important thing. Mom continued. I chose Dina because she specializes in traditional tattooing, which I think would work best for what you want. I needed a free-form tattoo, not one done with a stencil. It can be a whole lot harder to find someone who can do one, unless you want it looking like a prison tat. There wasn't much risk of that here. The studio looked like a combination doctor's office and art gallery, all clean lines and cool colors. There was no one in the front room. When Mom opened the door, a woman's voice called, "Just a minute." I walked over to a sign that read Tribal Tattoos. In smaller print, it said, "If you don't know your tribal tattoo, please don't ask me. The best way to honor your heritage is to learn about it yourself." A voice floated over from the next room, "Nothing worse than getting a Cherokee facial tattoo and discovering your grandmother was really Assiniboine." Mom greeted the young woman, who didn't look a lot older than me. She was about my height, with reddish-brown hair. Freckles dotted her round face. She introduced herself as Dina. "You get a lot of that?" I asked, pointing at the sign. "Unfortunately, yes. That's the problem with having a shop in the tourist district. People with some native blood come in here, wanting to recognize that part of their heritage, which is wonderful, but if you aren't even sure what your heritage is, you've got a long way to go before you ink yourself with it. So no cockopelli for me," I said. "I guess I'll have to go with the unicorn." Dina laughed. "Yes, your mother tells me she thinks you're Navajo." "She's not," said a quavering voice from the back room. An old woman appeared. "That girl is not Navajo." "Aunt Jean," Dina murmured under her breath. "I'm working." "Please don't. You're not Navajo." The woman jerked her chin at my mother. "So your daughter isn't Navajo?" I could see my mom struggling not to snap back, "You aren't either." Mom has issues with the whole respect for elders part of her culture. She did raise me to show respect, just not the blind sort she'd grown up with. "My daughter is adopted," she said evenly. "That's not what I mean. The Dine do not give up their children." She was right. The U.S. Indian Child Welfare Act overrode state adoption laws, giving tribes the right to overturn legal adoptions if the new parents weren't part of their nation. "This is my great-aunt Jean," Dina said. "She's a folklorist. Lived with the Navajo for, how long, Auntie?" The old woman ignored her and kept staring at me. "She's the one who got me interested in native traditions." A note of desperation crept into Dina's voice as she hurried on. "I was fascinated by her work, and I'm thrilled that she's come to live with me as her health declines." She emphasized the last words, and Mom nodded, taking this to mean we were seeing signs of dementia. "My great-grandfather has that, so we know what it's like." "Why didn't the Dine want her?" the old woman asked. "I was left at a hospital in Portland," I said. "I'm obviously native, but there's no way of telling what tribe. My grandmother has friends who are Navajo and they said I look Navajo. Doesn't mean I am, but unless my bio parents come forward, no one's ever going to know for sure." "Your mother didn't want you either." Mom stepped in front of me. "I think we should leave now." Dina leaped in with apologies, then turned on her aunt and reminded her that this was her place of business. I could tell Mom wanted to leave, but when the old woman retreated to the back room, she calmed down. I talked to Dina about my tattoo. Then Mom handed me my bathing suit and I went into a side room to change. I could hear Dina trying to distract Mom by talking about a university friend who'd studied Mom's work at Emily Carr. Mom's an architect who specializes in designing homes that fit into the natural landscape, and she's well known for it. Talking about her work was a good call, and by the time I came out, she was back to her usual self. Dina had me stand on a chair so she could get a better look at my birthmark. It used to be darker, Mom said. It's faded as she's gotten older, and she wants to keep it. In other words, make it as natural looking as possible, Dina said. I nodded. Just tattoo over what's there. I don't want to change it or make it look more like a paw print or anything. No reason to, Dina said, her fingers tracing the edges. It already does. Remarkable. What is that? Came the old woman's voice, so low I barely heard her. I turned to see her in the doorway staring at me. It's a birthmark, Auntie. Looks like a cat's paw, doesn't it? The old woman muttered something I didn't catch. Dina tried to smile, but it was strained. We don't speak Navajo, Auntie. The old woman's gaze met mine and in it I saw fear and disgust. I said, Yinald Lushii. She turned to my mother. That's why the Dine didn't want her. She's a witch. Mom didn't say a word, just set her jaw like she was locking it shut and handed me my clothing. I hesitated, but one look in her eyes told me not to argue. As I pulled on my clothes over my bathing suit, Dina apologized again and begged her aunt to leave. Neither my mom nor Dina's aunt paid any attention, Mom fuming, the old woman glowering and mumbling under her breath. When I was dressed, Mom ushered me to the door. I took one last longing look at a display of tattoos, then followed her out. 5. We walked a few doors down before Mom turned to me, deflating. I'm sorry, Maya. I know you were really looking forward to getting that tattoo. It's okay. It wasn't okay. If I had to wait, Dad might change his mind. There was no way I could go back to that shop, though. Mom looked around, distracted, her gaze finally settling on bubble tea stars. You were hungry, weren't you? Let's go get you something to eat and I'll call your dad. I wasn't hungry anymore, but I followed her in. She phoned Dad, saying only that there'd been a problem and I'd need to get my tattoo another day. We'll go to Vancouver next weekend, she said when she hung up. Make a special trip of it. Exactly what Serena had suggested just before she died. Her last words. I blinked back a prickle of tears and turned to peer into the ice cream freezer. I'm really sorry, Maya. I shouldn't have lost my temper. She was obviously senile and I overreacted. Do you know what that word meant? The one she called me. She shook her head. No idea. I don't even know if it's Navajo. She may have lived with them, but she's white. The language is nearly impossible for an outsider to learn. Calling me a witch, too. I shook my head. At least give me a chance to earn it first. Mom tried to smile and surveyed the menu blankly, like we hadn't been in here so often the counter girl had recognized us and said hello. Mom finally ordered an herbal tea with lemongrass. I got lychee bubble tea, cold milky tea with tapioca balls. You said you were hungry, Mom said. Maybe a sandwich. She pointed at the Vietnamese submarines. You like those? I'm okay. Ice cream, then, she pleaded, like if I didn't eat, she'd know I'd been permanently scarred by the old woman's words. They have Nanaimo bar. You love Nanaimo bar ice cream? Sure, I'll take a bowl. When we sat down, she was quiet for a minute, then said, what that old woman said, about you, the adoption. I sighed and set down my spoon. My mother left me in the hospital because she cared enough to want a better life for me. She must have had a good reason for not going through traditional adoption means. Maybe her family opposed it. Or maybe no one knew she'd been pregnant. I looked at her. Did I get that right? Because I've heard it, oh, only a million times. Just checking. As you get older, your feelings might change. Nope. I slurped up a few boba balls from my tea. I'm happy right where I am. And being abandoned is cool, in an old-fashioned gothic kind of way. That was a lie. Sure, other kids thought it was cool. I didn't. I had no interest in meeting my birth mother, not because I'd felt she'd abandoned me or didn't want me. I'd been a baby. She hadn't known me long enough to reject me personally. She'd just rejected the general idea of having a kid, and I'd won the adoption lottery with my parents. Abandoning me had been inconsiderate. I'd said that to my parents once, and they'd laughed. It was a strange word, I know, especially from an 8-year-old. They'd then given me the whole spiel on how my mother was a good person, blah, blah. What I meant was that she should have left a note detailing my family background and medical history. If I'm curious about anything, it's my family. Was I Navajo? Did I have grandparents? Brothers? Sisters? And, even more important, was there a history of medical problems? I suppose that's a weird thing to worry about, but I blame growing up in a medical research town. When I was little, my grandmother used to tell me this story about how I came to live with my family. She said my real mother was a cougar who'd had a late summer litter. She'd been an old cat and knew the signs that it would be a long, hard winter and her cubs wouldn't all survive. So she'd begged the sky god for mercy, and he turned her smallest cub into a human girl and told the cat to take her into the city. She'd left me at the hospital, but before she went, she'd pressed her paw to my hip, leaving me a mark to remember her by. That, she said, explained not only my birthmark but also my love of animals and the forest. Even as a kid, I knew it was only a story. Still, that's exactly how I felt, even now, like I'd just appeared, from nothing, with no background, no history. I was still thinking about that when Dad showed up. He didn't get mad like Mom had. She always jokes he's the only Irishman born without a temper. He was upset, though, and confused, not understanding how any person could lash out at a stranger like that. He was mostly just worried about me and how I was taking it, and because I didn't want him to worry, I went through the whole reassurance routine again, insisting I hadn't been scarred for life by the mutterings of a senile old woman. We left shortly after that, no one being much in the mood for dinner out. By the time we got home, the sun was dropping behind the house, setting it off in a glow of sunset. I love our house. My mom designed it, getting permission from the St. Cloud Company to take down the cabin they'd built for the last warden. Coming up the drive, you can't see it at all. It blends right in with the forest, like it's been there forever. It's a 2-story modified log cabin, with huge windows and skylights, so when you're inside, you feel like you aren't. It smells like the forest, too, even with the windows closed in bad weather. Both stories have wraparound decks. Right now, there was someone sitting on the bottom one, Daniel, with Kenji eye stretched over his feet as he played a game on his DS. Beside him was a duffel bag. As we drove in, he stood. "Got your text," he said when I climbed out. "How much did it hurt?" "Not at all," I said. "Apparently, I can't get a tattoo because I'm a witch." I could have told them. He stopped. "Oh, you said witch? Haha. You're serious?" "Kind of. I'll explain later." "Hello, Daniel," Mom said. "Hey." He nodded to my dad, then gestured at his duffel. "This okay?" He didn't say, "My dad's drunk again and I need a place to stay." He didn't need to. Mom said, "Of course it is. You still have your key, don't you?" Dad said. Daniel shrugged. "Yeah, but it's nice out." Even if it was pouring rain, he'd have waited on the porch. Daniel's funny about stuff like that. He has this rigid sense of right and wrong, and even if he has a key, he wouldn't go inside until we were there. We put Daniel's duffel in the spare room. He stays at least once a month, sometimes for a couple of days, so it would make sense to just keep some stuff here, but Daniel refused. I think he keeps hoping that this will be the last time he needs to stay with us. It never is. We went outside so I could check on the animals. On the side porch, Fitz stretched out in the last sliver of sunlight. "Dad felt sorry for you, didn't he?" I said. "That's great, but you're not going to learn if we keep getting you out of trees." Fitz only lifted his head, yellow eyes slitted, and yawned. Daniel laughed and crouched beside him, scratching behind his tufted ears, then under the ruff around his face. Fitz rolled onto his back and Daniel rubbed his stomach. I said. "If you get scratched, it's my own fault, I know. A cat scratch is bad enough, but a bobcat is twice the size of your average tabby. When he takes a swipe, there's blood involved." Fitz was on his best behavior with Daniel, though. He usually is. He can sense Daniel likes animals. That's how we met. A week after we moved in, Daniel brought us an injured squirrel. The old warden had taken in wounded animals, and Daniel had figured that was part of the job. As for what a 5-year-old was doing riding his bike deep into a predator-laced forest, well, that says something about the level of parental care in the Bianchi household. When he'd brought the squirrel, I'd asked my dad if we could look after it. After some talks about conservation and how the goal was to release the animals, not make them into pets, my parents agreed. That was how I discovered my passion for rehabilitating wildlife. It was also how I made my first friend in Salmon Creek. As Daniel played with Fitz, I sat on the grass, stretching out my legs and closing my eyes. I swore I could feel energy filling me. I inhaled the smells of the forest, the sharp tang of long grass, the sweet perfume of the trees. As I relaxed, I realized how tense I'd been since leaving the tattoo studio. I could say I was just disappointed, but what the old woman said as much as I tried to shrug it off. As I rested, Kenji circled the house. She gave Fitz a respectful berth, having been on the receiving end of his killer claws many times, and lay down beside me, head on my knee. I petted her a while and then asked Daniel what had happened this time. He shrugged and said, "The usual," which meant his dad got drunk and started in on him. Not physically. I think Daniel would have preferred that. Violence was something he understood, something he could deal with. This wasn't. Daniel's mom had taken off 3 years earlier. She'd never really been there much anyway, always vague, distracted, caught up in her studies at the lab, no time for Daniel and his 2 older brothers. The one who really missed her was her husband. That's when the drinking went from a case of beer on the weekend to dead drunk by 10 most nights. It was just Daniel and his dad now. His brothers were in college. Sometimes when Mr. Bianchi drank, he ignored Daniel, which was fine. But sometimes he didn't. He said stuff. Not the usual "you're lazy/stupid/worthless" insults either. These were ugly. He'd say that Daniel wasn't his son. That Daniel was a mistake. That he was a freak, an abomination, evil. Once, after Serena died, I was over there, and his dad started in on me, calling me a freak, too, and saying that I killed Serena to get Daniel. Daniel cold-cocked him. Then he took off to my place and stayed for 2 weeks. He went back, though. He always does. His dad had apologized. He always did that, told Daniel he'd been drunk and he didn't mean it and Daniel should never tell anyone what he'd said. Which showed how little he knew his son. Whatever happened in that house stayed in that house, and I kept my mouth shut, too, even if sometimes I thought I shouldn't. He's been worse lately, Daniel said after a while. I looked over. He was toying with Fitz now, dragging a long piece of grass over the porch as the bobcat chased it. Daniel was looking the other way, and all I could see was a sliver of his face. I didn't need to see his expression, though. Just hearing his tone, seeing the set of his broad shoulders, the way his bare arms tensed, muscles bunching, I knew what his face would look like, lips tight, dark eyes distant and sad. That's the part he didn't like, me seeing the sadness, the shame. I moved to sit on the edge of the deck. Kenji, I slunk over. Fitz gave both of us a watch your step, he's playing with me look. Daniel kept trailing the grass over the deck, leaving seeds behind. I wanted to reach out to him. Put my arm around him. Rub his back. Do something that said, I'm here. But I never did. Couldn't. After Serena died, there'd been long days and evenings, just the two of us, grieving, and sometimes he'd hug me, and that was fine because I knew it was just comfort. But I didn't feel like I could do the same back without a really good excuse or he might take it the wrong way. It's not just because of Serena. Obviously, I don't want to be the slut making a move on her dead pal's boyfriend. But more than that, I don't want to do anything that might make him uncomfortable staying here when he needs a place. I'm pretty sure I could give him a hug without him misinterpreting it, but I can't take that chance. So I sat, and said nothing. After a minute he slid over beside me. Fitz grumbled, then stalked off, with a half-hearted swipe at Kenji, as if this were her fault. We watched as he disappeared into the forest. Hunting time, I said, because I couldn't think of anything else. He does a good job of it, Daniel said. As long as he can catch his dinner off guard. Missing a back leg meant Fitz could walk fine, he just couldn't run, either after prey or away from predators. And as long as he doesn't climb a tree to get it. I gave a soft laugh and pulled my knees up. After another moment of silence, I said, you said your dad's getting worse. Yeah. I'll be glad when he goes on that business trip tomorrow. Bet you will, too. Birthday party time. He jostled my shoulder and I forced a smile. After a minute he cleared his throat and said, he had a teleconference with the St. Clouds last week. I think he told them he wants to leave Salmon Creek. I looked over sharply. What? Lately, when he's drunk, he goes on about how he wants out, how he's trapped. Trapped in Salmon Creek because of me and because of his contract with the company. Once he sobers up, he never wants to talk about it. Then he had this meeting. How'd it go? Bad. I think he tried to get out of his contract. They told him no. He should have known that. Everyone's contract is tight for security reasons. You remember how the whole town council had to lobby the St. Clouds to let Serena's folks go after. I nodded. From what I understood, it hadn't been much of a fight. Mayor Tilson and everyone took their case to the St. Clouds, who'd given Serena's parents a generous severance package. For that kind of thing, you really needed a good reason. You couldn't leave the project halfway through and take your expertise to a competitor. So now he's mad, I said, which means he's drinking more. Daniel nodded. Well, he can't blame you for that. Daniel tossed a stick for Kenji. He doesn't blame you, does he? Yeah, he does. Who knows why? Finally, tonight, I just had enough. I told him I wasn't holding him back. As far as I'm concerned, he can go. I'll take care of myself. Not like I don't do that already. He flipped out. He called me an ungrateful brat and came at me, and I hit him again. I think so. I mean, he exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck, eyes closing as he grimaced. I must have. I just don't. His gaze went distant, the way it had that morning, staring after the hiker, and when I looked into his eyes, I saw nothing. Daniel. He shook it off. Yeah, I hit him. I just got so mad that I didn't even realize. Well, you know. Your boxing instincts kicked in. He came at you and you hit him without realizing it. Right. Exactly. Another exhale, this one sounding like relief. Anyway, he's fine, which is why I'm here. You could stay here, I said softly. If he does leave. He rubbed his arms, like he was getting cold. His gaze was down, but his jaw was set in that way I knew well, ready to refuse. Only he didn't want to refuse. He wanted to know that if it came down to that, his dad leaving, he could stay here. I could see that worry and that need wearing away at his pride until finally he grunted, yeah. Okay. After another second, he got up, and said, let's feed the animals. 6. We put Kenji in her dog run. If I go in the shed while there's a predator in residence, it makes her anxious. And when she gets anxious, whining and scratching at the door, it really doesn't help the sick animals inside. As we left the dog run, Daniel said, don't mention that stuff to your parents, okay? I'm sure Dad's just talking crazy again. No need to mention it until there's a reason to. Yeah. You need a jacket? It's getting cool. I'm good. The shed is really a specially built wildlife rehabilitation building, designed by my mom. The roof is glass. It's in the shade, so we don't barbecue the critters, and there's plenty of ventilation. The shed is temporary lodgings. I don't take any animal that has a good chance of recovering on its own, because no matter how careful I am, sometimes re-release isn't possible, and the animal has to go to the wildlife center outside Victoria. Right now, the shed housed one snake, 2 fledglings, and a marten. The sharp-tailed snake was a young one that had been stepped on by a hiker, who'd recognized it as a rare species. The fledglings were orphaned bald eagles. The marten, a cat-sized predator that looks like a long-haired weasel, had been shot by a moron teenage tourist playing big game hunter with a crossbow. We started with the snake, dumping in a couple of live slugs. Serena used to argue that killing one creature to save another made no sense. We'd have long debates about that. Not arguing, just working it through. I agreed she had a point, but the snake was rare and the slugs weren't, so it made sense from a conservation view. But if you pushed her argument even further, you could say that no predator should be saved, because even if I feed them roadkill and hunter leftovers, they'll kill other animals when they get out. Then there's the argument for letting nature take its course with every living thing, and so we should leave wounded animals to their fate. I don't mind it when people say stuff like that. I just don't happen to agree. After the snake, we fed the fledglings. Again, I dropped the food in, using gloves. Hand feeding them is only done in an emergency. With the birds, letting it fall into the nest also mimics the way Mama Eagle would do it. They look ready to leave soon, Daniel said. I nodded. Dad said we might take them to the wildlife center next week. The birds were almost ready to fly, meaning they had to go to the center, because I wasn't equipped to help them learn that. Someday I would be, but for now I stuck with nursing duty. This guy looks ready to go soon, too, Daniel said as he peered into the marten's cage. Wow! Has it really only been a week? Less. Believe me, she has a long way to. I stopped. The marten had woken and reared up against the side of her cage, nose wriggling madly. When she saw me watching, she chirped, then started racing laps as she waited for food. Daniel laughed. Someone's definitely feeling better. That's not. I peeled off the gloves. That's not possible. It should take days before she's even walking. You're just too good a nurse. You need to go visit your grandma, let your dad and me take over, slow things down. It's true the animals don't heal as fast when I'm not around. That sounds like bragging, but we saw it every time I went away. Daniel knows how to do all the stuff. So do my parents. But when I'm gone, the healing process slows. Dr. Hajek, the Salmon Creek veterinarian, says some people are just natural healers. She sometimes calls me into town to help with pets that are in a lot of pain. I calm them down so she can do her thing, and in return she volunteers her time with cases of mine that need serious medical attention. Still, as good as I am, there was no way the marten should have been racing around her cage. When I said that to Daniel, he only shrugged. Obviously she wasn't as badly hurt as you thought. Hate to break it to you, Maya, but you can be wrong. Dr. Hajek did the diagnosis. I leaned over the cage. The marten reared up again and chirped at me. That bolt went into the right haunch end. I stared at the marten's haunch. The skin was bare, where Dr. Hajek had shaved it. Underneath, the only sign of injury was a pale scar crisscrossed with dark stitches. When I'd checked the marten yesterday morning, I'd thought she was healing fast. But the wound had still been there. I reached into the cage. Maya. Daniel said. Gloves? Those teeth and claws are like needles. You're the one always telling me. I didn't hear the rest. It was as if my hand was being pulled into the cage against my will. The marten didn't even flinch, just sat there and waited, dark eyes on mine, calm and trusting. I touched her wounded flank. Pain ripped through my leg and I stumbled back. Maya. Darkness enveloped me. I inhaled the scent of pine needles. My leg throbbed. My heart raced so fast, I panted for breath. Pop goes the weasel, a boy yelled. Another guy laughed. Footsteps pounded the dry earth so loud they sounded like an oncoming locomotive. A single thought filled my head. Escape. I pulled myself along, dragging my injured leg over a carpet of dead needles. Maya. A warm hand grabbed my chin. Come on, Maya. I gasped and blinked. I was sitting on the floor. In Daniel's lap. I bolted to my feet so fast, I elbowed him in the stomach. Thanks, he wheezed. Next time I'll let you hit the floor. What happened? You fainted. The corners of his mouth twitched. I believe swooned is the correct term. It's not nearly as romantic as it sounds, you know. More like a deadweight collapse. Withdrawal. I wiped my mouth and looked around, still getting my bearings. Daniel's voice softened as he stepped closer. Are you okay? I nodded. He asked what happened, but I couldn't tell him, because I wasn't really sure myself. I just stared at the marten, watching me now, head tilted. When I wrenched my gaze away and went to get her dinner, I realized my hands were shaking. Daniel took the meat from me, donned the gloves, and fed the marten. With his back to me, he said, so I spilled my guts already. Your turn. If you won't tell me what happened just now, at least tell me what happened at the tattoo place. I did. I was tempted to joke that his dad was right, apparently I was evil, but he wouldn't appreciate that. When I was done, he stood there, his broad face screwed up in disbelief. So this old lady, who's never met you before, sees your birthmark and says you're a witch. Sounds like something from a TV movie, doesn't it? I hummed a few bars of suitably sinister music. Should have been a fortune teller, though. The teenage girl goes to the fortune teller, whose gypsy grandmother says she's cursed. Maybe that was it. Like one of those reality TV shows. You got pranked? In Nanaimo? Must be a low-budget Canadian production. Is there any other kind? I laughed and took out a little more meat for the marten, who spun in her cage, chirping. At least someone didn't think I was evil incarnate. Not if I had food anyway. I dropped it in. Daniel said, if the woman has Alzheimer's or whatever, her niece should keep her out of the studio before she scares off more customers. I know. I closed the marten's cage. She narrowed her eyes and chattered, scolding me for not giving her more. I shook my head. We can't have you getting too fat to run when we let you go. We're done talking about it, then. Daniel said as I shut the food locker. I shrugged. Nothing more to talk about. It wasn't exactly high on the scale of enjoyable life experiences, but I can deal with it. You just fainted, Maya. That has nothing to do with. No? Good. Then you won't mind me telling your parents, so they can get you to the clinic tonight and check you over. I'm fine, I said as I double-checked my charges. I couldn't hang out and play with them after they were fed. Minimal human contact was the goal, however tough that was sometimes. I fainted because I missed dinner and I'm starving. And, yes, maybe I'm kind of stressed. But my parents are already worried about what that woman said about my birth mother. You know how they get about that. They'll decide it's opened up a Pandora's box of conflict over my adoption and my racial identity and blah, blah, blah. I really don't want to spend the next week on Dr. Fodor's couch, thank you very much. All right, then. I'll forget it for now, but if you pass out again, I'll tell someone. And you'll make sure you aren't in here by yourself. Get your mom or dad to help you. Say you're worried about the fledglings imprinting on you or whatever. Yes, sir. We headed out the door. I'd turned to lock up when Daniel's hand clamped my shoulder. Don't move, he whispered. I followed his gaze to a light brown form crouched on a rock, barely visible in the thick twilit woods. It's just I was about to say Fitz when I saw the long tail swishing. Dad! I shouted. Then even louder, Dad! I backed up and slammed into Daniel. Move toward the house. The shed is probably what he wants, so he won't follow us to the house. This is exactly what I was worried about. He's too used to people. I nudged Daniel backward. Nothing here for you, Marv. Get going. Then, Dad. The cougar rose, readying itself for the leap. Its head appeared through the cover of shadow and I saw its face, and its two perfectly good ears. It wasn't Marv. The cat leaped. Daniel grabbed my arm and whipped me behind him so hard I flew off my feet. I hit the ground as the house door slammed and Dad shouted. I saw Daniel stumble back. Saw the huge tom in flight, on target to hit him. I screamed and jumped up. Daniel twisted to run. The cat caught him in the back and knocked him off his feet. Huge canines flashed, heading for the back of Daniel's neck, the killing blow. As I covered the last few feet, I heard the rifle fire. Heard my dad shout, "Maya!" Heard my mother's shriek. Felt the bullet was past me. I kicked at the cougar's head. My foot connected, knocking it sideways, teeth snapping together harmlessly. The cat turned to me, lips pulled back, teeth flashing, eyes slitted as he snarled. I kicked him again. My parents shouted for me to move aside so Dad could take the shot. Only, if he did, he stood a chance of hitting Daniel, and I wasn't letting that happen. "Go!" I shouted. "Get off him!" The cat had Daniel pinned face first to the ground. Daniel lay still, playing dead as I kept shouting at the cougar and my parents shouted at me. The cat snarled again, and I braced myself, ready to run if those powerful hind legs bunched for flight. But he made no move to come after me, just snarled and spat and stayed over Daniel. Rage boiled up in me. Maybe it was shock, but it felt like pure fury. I screamed at the cat, looking him square in the eye, and when I did it was like everything else disappeared. The world seemed to dip and darken, and I smelled wet earth and thick musk and fresh blood. The wind whipped past, like I was running. Running so fast the ground whizzed beneath me, the wind cut across my skin. Exhilaration filled me. My muscles sang, and it was the sweetest. The sudden scream of a cougar jolted me back to reality. The big cat was still staring at me. Just staring. Another scream. I turned to see a second cougar charging toward us. A cougar with a ragged ear. The younger cat jumped off Daniel and spun to meet Marv. They hit so hard the ground vibrated. I grabbed for Daniel, but he was already on his feet, reaching for me. He pushed me ahead of him as we ran for the porch, the cats snarling and growling and yelping behind us. My dad pulled us onto the porch, then lifted the rifle. "Rick, no," Mom said, passing him the one with tranquilizer darts instead. When he hesitated, she said, "The kids are fine." He still hesitated, like he didn't care, just as long as he made sure it never happened again. "Dad, please," I said. He looked at me, then took the tranquilizer gun, aimed, and fired. The dart hit the younger cougar in the flank. He let out a yowl and attacked Marv with fresh fervor, then in mid-twist, toppled over. Marv grabbed the unconscious cat by the neck and shook him. When the other Tom didn't react, Marv chuffed and looked at us, like he expected applause. Instead, he saw the barrel of a rifle. With one chirp of indignation, he galloped toward the woods. Dad fired, but Marv veered at the last second and disappeared before Dad could shoot again. Daniel was okay. He had some puncture wounds where the cougar had dug in his claws, and he'd definitely be bruised and battered tomorrow, but he'd avoided a bite, which was the main thing. He argued that he didn't need medical attention, but Mom drove us into Salmon Creek, calling ahead to make sure one of the doctors would be at the clinic. Dr. Inglis met us there, which surprised Mom. Dr. Inglis is the head of the research lab, and doesn't usually work at the clinic, but she said she'd been out with Dr. Lamb, and when he'd gotten the page, she decided to come along. While Dr. Lamb looked after Daniel, Dr. Inglis chatted with me. She'd heard this was my second cougar encounter today, and wanted to know all about it. She made it sound like personal curiosity, but I knew it wasn't. She was making sure I was doing okay, that I didn't need the services of Dr. Fodor to deal with the trauma. One drawback to living in a medical research town is that they're paranoid about health, both physical and mental. The adults get off easy. Not the kids. Sneeze twice in a row and the teacher calls the school nurse. Drop out of a sport or let your grades fall and you're whisked off to Dr. Fodor's couch. They especially monitor the teens, as if hormonal surges could make us spontaneously combust at any moment. The worst is when Dr. Davidoff comes to town. I hate Dr. Davidoff. We all do. He's creepy, with cold hands and awkward, lame jokes. But he's the St. Cloud's top doctor, so every year, he brings a team to visit the lab. And, since they have world-class doctors on hand, it's time for every kid to get a complete physical. Oh joy! My parents are big on eating natural food, getting lots of exercise, and staying healthy, but even they find the town's obsession a bit much. Still, they don't knock it, not if it means I get the best care possible. I suppose that's the point. The town keeps its employees happy by keeping their kids healthy. Since they have the resources right there, it's an easy benefit to provide. Dr. Lamb cleaned Daniel's wounds and gave him painkillers for tomorrow. Then Dr. Inglis listened to his version of events and made sure he wasn't traumatized before she called Chief Carling to report it. Out here, wildlife attacks are like gunshot wounds in the city. Everyone needs to be recorded. Dad took the tranquilized cougar to Dr. Hajek's. The Tom had been tagged, so we needed to find out where he was from and whether he could be returned. She had the facilities to hold him, we didn't. The cat had come for the shed. I was sure of that. No matter how clean I keep it, it carries the scent of the rabbits and fawns I've housed there, and new predators to the area often check it out, hoping for a well-stocked food larder. Once they realize they can't get in, they usually leave it alone. As for why the new Tom was in our park at all, he was clearly checking out territorial prospects. The island isn't overpopulated with cougars, so Marv doesn't see a lot of challengers. As he gets older, though, they're bound to increase. This only proved how quickly a younger and more dangerous big cat would move in if we relocated Marv. I felt bad for the old guy. He'd come to our rescue, and how would he be repaid? Hunted and tranquilized to teach him a lesson about getting too friendly with humans. Yet as romantic as it is to think Marv had been protecting us, it was far more likely that he was simply protecting his territory. Still, I'd feel guilty when Dad did it, and, to be honest, I'd miss my encounters with the old cat. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.